The river moves without pity. Its surface glitters with the light of dawn, smooth as glass, yet beneath it lies a current that carries everything forward. Wood, debris, prayers whispered into the water, and sometimes, even people. In late medieval Europe, as the great cities swelled with guilds and markets, and the spires of cathedrals reached ever higher toward heaven, there was a quieter, more troubling growth. The number of those whom society called mad. Men and women who muttered to themselves, who shouted at unseen figures, who laughed in churches at the wrong time, who wandered the streets naked in the snow. Some were tolerated for a time, looked upon as holy fools or as unfortunate souls marked by God's hand. But as towns grew more crowded, as order became prized above all else, tolerance waned. And so, in some cities, the mad were not chained in hospitals, nor killed outright. They were loaded onto boats, boats with no destination, boats set adrift. This practice, whispered in chronicles and immortalized in Sebastian Brandt's Narrenschiff, The Ship of Fools, published in 1494, became both reality and metaphor. For there are records, scattered like fragments on the current of history, that speak of towns along the Rhine and in the Low Countries placing the insane upon barges, pushing them into the flow and watching as the river carried them away. To the townsfolk, this was not cruelty, but cleansing, out of sight, out of mind. If madness was a contagion, better it drift downstream. If it was a curse, better it trouble another town. And if it was divine punishment, then let the waters, God's waters, decide their fate. Picture it. A narrow wooden boat, not built for long voyages, creaking under the weight of its human cargo. Men with tangled hair, women with torn dresses, some silent, others babbling. They do not row, they do not steer, they drift. The river is both prison and escape, execution and exile. And the people on shore? They watch. Some cross themselves, others laugh. A few weep, for they recognize a brother, a sister, a neighbor once known and now discarded. But the river swallows all. The Ship of Fools was not always a literal vessel. In Brandt's famous book, it was satire, a biting allegory of human folly, with sinners of every kind portrayed as passengers on a boat bound not for salvation, but for disaster. Yet the reason Brandt's image struck so deep, the reason it resonated across Europe, was because the metaphor grew from soil already rich with reality. Towns really did expel their mad, and what more vivid symbol than to set them floating powerless toward the unknown? The 15th and 16th centuries were an age obsessed with order. Order in theology, order in hierarchy, order in the streets. Anything that threatened order was suspect. Madness, with its unpredictable eruptions, was feared not only as affliction, but as disruption. It mocked reason in an era that sought to codify it, and so it was cast out. Banished like heresy, purged like disease. And the rivers of Europe became silent accomplices. The Rhine, the Meuse, the Seine, all carried these drifting lives. Some boats no doubt ran aground at the next village where the unwanted cargo was unloaded and the cycle repeated. Others perhaps sank quietly, their passengers swallowed into mud and memory. Few were recorded, fewer still were saved. Yet, the image persisted, burned into the imagination of Europe. The lunatic on the boat, drifting without oars. It haunted art, sermons, plays. It told the sane what they wished to hear, that madness had no place among them, that it belonged elsewhere, anywhere but here. But beneath that comfort lay unease. For if society could so easily place the insane on a ship and push them away, what did that say about society itself? Was the madness truly on the boat, or on the shore? This is why the Ship of Fools endures. Because it was never only about the mad. It was about the line, thin as a plank of wood, that separated inclusion from exclusion, reason from unreason, safety from exile. And it is a line that, once crossed, cannot easily be uncrossed. Because when the boat disappears around the bend of the river, carrying its forgotten passengers, the town feels lighter, cleaner. But somewhere deep inside, a question lingers. Who will be next? The river moves without pity, and it carries not only those who were set adrift, but the conscience of those who sent them. The boat drifts further. The current carries it past vineyards and castles, under bridges heavy with merchants, past fishermen who pause mid-net, their eyes following the vessel as though it were a bad omen. On board there is no captain, no chart, no port waiting at the other end. Only bodies swaying with the movement of the river, singing, crying, muttering prayers in voices that overlap like a broken choir. Some laugh as though they were at a feast. Others crouch, rocking silent. The chronicles never record their names. They appear only as shadows in town registers. Mad woman expelled, vagrant lunatic removed, fools set adrift. They vanish into the water's history as though their lives were less than the wood that carried them. But the memory of the act, the gesture of setting them afloat, spread. In Strasbourg, in Basel, in Nuremberg, sermons invoked the image of the ship of fools. Priests warned their flocks not to become passengers, not to drink too much, not to gamble, not to abandon prayer. The insane, adrift on their boat, became symbols of sin itself. Their suffering was moralized, their exile transformed into lesson. And yet the boats were real. Fragments of civic documents tell of madmen delivered downriver, sometimes purchased by other towns as curiosities, sometimes locked in cages like beasts for public amusement. It was not always exile in silence. Sometimes it was spectacle, a fool brought to market, a madwoman displayed in a square. The river had become conveyor belt, ferrying the unwanted from one set of eyes to another. But there were darker possibilities too. What happened when no town wanted them, when no one hauled the boat ashore? The Rhine is long, the sea is farther still. A flimsy hull, a sudden storm, a night without stars. How many were lost without trace? How many bodies sank into mud, their stories swallowed? The people of the towns did not ask. They did not want the answer. It was enough to know the boat had gone. The water had taken them. Order had been restored. And so the ship of fools floated not only on rivers, but in the imagination. Painters like Hieronymus Bosch filled panels with grotesque figures, half drunk, half mad, tumbling about a boat that sails nowhere. Writers echoed the image in satire. Preachers wielded it like a threat. Madness, stripped of humanity, became allegory. The lunatic was no longer a man or woman, but a warning, a mirror held up to society's sins. But in pushing them away, society revealed itself. Because what is more irrational than pretending the problem disappears when it floats downstream? What is more foolish than thinking the water cleanses what the heart refuses to face? The line between reason and unreason was not on the boat. It was on the shore, where those who called themselves sane convinced themselves of their own wisdom by discarding the vulnerable. The practice of setting the insane adrift began to fade by the late 16th century, replaced by other methods, confinement in hospitals, cages, or cells. But the boat lingered in memory, immortalized by Brandt's book, by Bosch's brush, by whispers along the Rhine. And in later centuries, philosophers like Michel Foucault would look back and see in the ship of fools not only cruelty, but revelation, that a society defines itself as much by whom it casts out as by whom it embraces. That madness is not only an illness, it is a mirror, reflecting the limits of tolerance, the fragility of order, the cost of belonging. For those men and women drifting downriver, there was no such analysis, no metaphor, no philosophy. There was only water, the groan of wood against current, the cries of companions fading into hoarse silence, the feeling of being carried, helpless to a place no one would ever record. And perhaps, just perhaps, one or two believed the boat was not exile, but pilgrimage, that the river was not judgment, but salvation, that somewhere beyond the bend there was a shore that would welcome them. Whether that shore ever existed, history does not say. The river moves without pity, but it remembers everything that has been entrusted to it.